Take your face back. It started subtly, like a whisper you barely hear but can't ignore. A flicker in the mirror, a feeling that something is just off. The first time Emily noticed, it was so minor she laughed at herself. A tiny mole near her collarbone had vanished overnight. She ran her fingers over her skin, searching for the little bump she had since childhood. Nothing. Just smooth, unbroken skin. Maybe she had imagined it. Maybe she had mistaken its location. The mind plays tricks. Then it happened again. Her hair, she always tied it up in a messy bun before bed. Yet when she glanced at the mirror the next morning, her reflection showed her hair neatly combed down, parted in a way she never wore it. She reached up, touching her head. The bun was there. But in the mirror, it was down. The moment she blinked, it was back to normal. A chill ran down her spine, but she shook it off. Fatigue, stress, she worked long hours, barely slept. It had to be her imagination. Except it kept happening. Day by day, small things shifted. Her eyebrows seemed thinner one morning, thicker the next. Her lips looked slightly fuller, as if she had gotten injections overnight. The freckles across her nose darkened, then faded. By the time she realized these changes weren't just in her head, it was too late to ignore them. Something was wrong. Deeply, terribly wrong. The final straw came late one evening, when she was alone in her apartment. She had just finished brushing her teeth, about to turn off the bathroom light, when her gaze flicked to the mirror. And she froze. The woman in the reflection was not her. Similar, yes. But not her. The eyes were a shade too light, the shape of her jawline slightly sharper. Her expression was smug. A stranger's smirk playing on lips that were almost hers. Emily stumbled backward, knocking over the toothbrush holder. Her heart pounded in her chest. The woman in the mirror didn't move. Not in sync with her, not in delay, she simply stood there, staring back. Then, right before the light flickered, right before the room plunged into darkness, words formed across the mirror's surface. Take your face back. You took mine. Emily ran. She didn't stop running until she was in her bedroom, slamming the door shut behind her. Her breath came in ragged gasps, heart hammering so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. The apartment was silent, except for the dull hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. She squeezed her eyes shut, gripping the edge of the dresser for support. Maybe she was losing her mind. Maybe this was some kind of sleep-deprived hallucination. But the fear in her gut told her otherwise. She forced herself to think rationally. The mirror, something had been wrong with it for weeks. But why? Could it be a trick of the light? A stress-induced delusion? No. That woman, whoever she was real. Emily hesitated, then forced herself to move. She grabbed her phone, switched on the flashlight, and crept toward the bathroom. The hallway felt impossibly long, the air heavy, thick with something she couldn't name. She stepped inside. The mirror was blank. Just a normal reflection. Her face, her real face, stared back at her, wide-eyed, terrified. No strange woman. No words. Nothing. Her stomach twisted. Did she imagine it? She stepped closer, close enough for her breath to fog the glass. She raised a trembling hand and touched the mirror's surface. Cold. Solid. Real. Then, just as she was about to turn away, the words appeared again, this time in streaks, as if traced by invisible fingers. Take your face back. You took mine. Emily stumbled backward, a strangled cry escaping her throat. Her reflection, no, the woman, was back. This time, she was mimicking Emily's movements. Lifting a hand. Tilting her head. But the expression wasn't hers. It was twisted in something between rage and amusement. Emily's knees nearly buckled. Who are you? She whispered. The woman's lips parted. A sound, not quite a voice, rasped through the glass. "You know." A scream built in Emily's throat, but she choked it down. No. No, this wasn't happening. She turned, bolting out of the bathroom, yanking open her bedroom closet. An old scarf, a roll of tape, anything. She grabbed the thickest towel she could find and ran back, throwing it over the mirror. The second the glass disappeared from view, the air in the bathroom lightened. The pressure in her chest eased. She backed away, breathing hard. Maybe it was some sort of optical illusion. Maybe she was sick. Or maybe the woman in the mirror was real. And she wanted something back. Emily didn't sleep that night. She sat curled up on her bed, knees pulled to her chest, staring at the bathroom door as if it might swing open at any moment. Her phone lay next to her, but she didn't dare call anyone. What would she even say? "Hey, I think my reflection is trying to steal my face?" She thought about leaving, grabbing her keys, running to a motel, crashing at a friend's place. But something in her gut told her it wouldn't help. The woman in the mirror wasn't tied to the apartment. She was tied to Emily. The first rays of dawn filtered through the blinds, and Emily finally moved. Slowly, cautiously, she stood up, inching toward the bathroom. The towel still covered the mirror. Good. She hesitated, then reached out and touched the fabric. It felt normal. Just a towel. Her fingers curled around the edge, pulse racing. She needed to see. To know. She yanked it down. The mirror was empty. No messages. No twisted reflection. Just her. A shaky laugh bubbled up in her throat. Maybe she really had lost it last night. She exhaled, pressing her fingers to her temples. Then she saw it. Not in the mirror. In her phone screen, lying on the bed behind her. A face. Watching her. Emily whirled around, but the room was empty. Her stomach twisted violently, and she snatched up her phone, hands shaking so hard she nearly dropped it. She opened the camera. Slowly, cautiously, she turned it toward herself, toward the mirror. And there she was. The woman. Her face was Emily's, but not quite. Her eyes were wrong, her expression just slightly off. Like a bad copy. Emily's breath hitched. This wasn't just a reflection anymore. This thing was real. It was pretending to be her. And it was getting better at it. With a trembling hand, Emily switched to her front camera. Her real face, her real one, looked back at her. Pale, tired, afraid. She flicked back to the mirror. The woman's smirk widened. Then, without warning, her lips moved. But not in the mirror. In Emily's phone. "You don't belong here." Emily screamed and hurled the phone across the room. It hit the wall with a crack, screen shattering. She didn't care. Because when she looked up, the reflection was gone. But she could still feel it. Watching. Waiting. And for the first time, she had the sinking, gut-wrenching feeling that it wasn't trying to take her face. It was trying to give her something back. Emily didn't leave her apartment that day. She paced in circles, trying to make sense of what was happening. If this thing wasn't just copying her, if it was trying to give her something back, what did that even mean? Was it possible that she was the wrong one? That she didn't belong? No. That was insane. She knew who she was. Emily Carter. 26 years old. Lived in this apartment for 3 years. Worked as a freelance designer. Grew up in Ohio. Had a scar on her left knee from falling off a bike when she was 7. Her parents had. Her breath caught in her throat. Her parents. She could see their faces, hear their voices, but when was the last time she had spoken to them? Her hand shook as she grabbed her phone, the shattered screen flickering to life. She scrolled through her contacts, searching for mom or dad. Nothing. She tried their names. Nothing. Hard hammering, she opened her messages. There had to be something. A birthday text. A holiday greeting. But there were no old messages. Not just from them. From anyone. Her fingers went cold. This wasn't possible. She switched to her photos, scrolling frantically. The images were there, her, smiling at a coffee shop. Her, at the beach last summer. But something was off. The backgrounds felt too generic. The angles too distant, like the shots weren't taken by her, but for her. And then she saw it. A picture of her own reflection. She didn't remember taking it. But there she was, standing in front of her bathroom mirror, staring at the camera. And the caption. Give it back. Her blood turned to ice. The apartment suddenly felt suffocating, the walls pressing in. She stumbled to her feet, grabbed her coat, and ran. Out the door, down the stairs, onto the street. She needed fresh air. Needed to clear her head. The city buzzed around her, normal and indifferent. People walked past, cars honked, the world kept moving. But something gnawed at her gut. A creeping, bone-deep wrongness. She ducked into a small coffee shop, hoping for a moment of normalcy. The barista gave her a polite smile, asked for her order. Emily opened her mouth. And stopped. The girl behind the counter. She looked exactly like Emily. No. Not exactly. The hair was a little different. The freckles on the wrong side. But the face. Their eyes met, and Emily saw it. Recognition. The girl's face paled. Her lips parted slightly, like she wanted to say something, but then. She turned away. Rushed to the back. Disappeared. Emily stood, frozen. Her head swam. Her body screamed at her to run, but her feet wouldn't move. Something was wrong. Something was terribly, horribly wrong. And then, behind her, in the reflection of the shop's window, she saw herself. Not her real reflection. The other one. Smiling. And mouthing one word. Soon. Emily stumbled backward, nearly knocking over a chair. The reflection in the window lingered for a second longer than it should have before vanishing, dissolving like smoke. She spun around, expecting to see something, someone, standing behind her. But there was nothing. Just a busy street, indifferent strangers, the hum of normal life. Her hands were shaking. She felt lightheaded, her breath coming in shallow gasps. She needed to get away from anything with a reflective surface. No windows. No mirrors. No chance of seeing her again. She bolted from the coffee shop, pushing past a couple of confused customers, and stumbled into the cold evening air. Her apartment was out of the question. The mirrors there weren't safe. Hell, she wasn't safe. She needed answers. And there was only one place left to look. The public library was nearly empty by the time she arrived, the fluorescent lights humming faintly overhead. She made a beeline for the computers, forcing herself to breathe normally. If this person, was trying to take something back, she had to know what. She typed her name into a search engine. Emily Carter. A few social media links. A couple of design portfolios. Everything seemed normal. Too normal. It was all surface level, the kind of results you'd get for a ghost account, a shell of a person. She tried something else. Missing persons, Ohio. Pages of results flooded the screen. She skimmed through them, eyes darting over names and faces, until her stomach dropped. There she was. Or rather, someone who looked just like her. The headline, Emily Carter, age 26, missing for 3 years. Last seen in Columbus, Ohio. She clicked the article, her pulse roaring in her ears. A photo loaded at the top, a slightly younger version of her, smiling in a way that felt real. Familiar. Me. Except it wasn't. The article said Emily had vanished on a trip back home. That her parents had reported her missing. That they had never stopped looking. Her parents. She had parents. And they weren't in her phone. They weren't in her memories the way they should have been. Like someone had erased them. Like someone had erased her. Her hands clenched into fists. She wasn't crazy. This wasn't some breakdown. Something had taken her life, her real life, and left her with this version of it. And if she was here, if she was living this life, then where was the real Emily? A chill crawled down her spine. She already knew the answer. She had seen it. In the mirror. Emily pushed back from the computer, heart hammering. She could feel eyes on her, the weight of something watching. Slowly, she turned toward the dark window beside her. Her reflection was there. But it wasn't mimicking her movements anymore. It was standing still. Staring. And then, ever so slowly, it reached up and dragged a hand down its face. Skin peeled away like wet paper, revealing raw, pulsing flesh underneath. And beneath that, another face. A familiar face. A face that belonged to her. Her reflection smiled, blood running down its chin. And on the glass, letters formed from something dark and dripping. Give it back. Emily's breath hitched. Her legs moved before she could think, sprinting out of the library, out into the night, where the streetlights flickered like dying stars. She had to end this. Had to take back what was hers. Before it was too late. Emily ran blindly through the empty streets, her pulse a wild drumbeat in her ears. The city felt different now, darker, heavier, like the buildings were pressing in on her, like the air itself was thick with something unnatural. Every reflective surface she passed, storefronts, car windows, puddles in the cracked pavement, seemed to ripple, shifting just a fraction of a second too late. Her reflection wasn't hers anymore. And it was following her. She knew she couldn't keep running. This wasn't something she could escape. She had to face it. She had to take back whatever had been stolen. Her phone was already in her hand, her fingers moving before she could second-guess herself. She called the number from the missing persons report. It rang once. Twice. Then a voice answered. A woman's voice, thick with exhaustion and something else, something raw. Hello? Emily's throat tightened. She didn't know what she had expected. Mom? The word felt foreign on her tongue, like a memory she wasn't sure belonged to her. There was silence on the other end. Then a sharp intake of breath. Oh my God. Emily? Hearing her name spoken like that, with so much disbelief, so much hope, it nearly broke her. She swallowed hard. I don't know what's happening, she admitted. But I think something's wrong with me. A muffled sob. Then, where are you? Emily hesitated. She didn't know. She didn't know what was real anymore. But she knew where she had to go. She had to go home. The house was smaller than she remembered. The porch light buzzed weakly, casting a dim yellow glow over the front steps. Her hand trembled as she reached for the doorbell. Footsteps inside. Then the door swung open. And there, standing in the warm light of the doorway, was her mother. Older than she had pictured. More fragile. But unmistakably hers. Her mother let out a strangled cry, covering her mouth with both hands. Tears already spilling down her face. Oh my God, she whispered. It's you. It's really you. Emily wanted to step forward. Wanted to fall into her mother's arms, to believe, even for a second, that everything could be okay. But then, her mother's face twisted. Not in sadness. In horror. She took a step back, her voice trembling. "No," she choked out. "No, no, no, you can't be here." Emily's stomach dropped. "What?" Her mother's eyes darted past her, over her shoulder. Emily turned. And saw herself. Standing in the dark. Watching. The reflection had stepped out of the mirror. And it was real. Her mother let out a sob, pressing a shaking hand to her chest. "You can't both be here," she whispered. "That's not how it works." The other Emily smiled. And then lunged. Pain exploded behind Emily's eyes as she was slammed backward into the house. Her skull cracked against the hardwood floor, and stars burst in her vision. Her reflection was on top of her, hands pressing into her shoulders, pinning her down. "You took my life," the thing above her hissed, voice wet and wrong, too many voices layered together. "You took my face." Emily thrashed, but the weight was unbearable. Fingers wrapped around her throat, pressing. She couldn't breathe. Dark spots swarmed her vision. Somewhere in the distance, her mother was screaming. And then, a mirror shattered. Glass rained down like jagged stars. And the pressure lifted. Emily gasped, rolling onto her side, clutching her throat. She blinked up. And saw the reflection convulsing, its body distorting like a warped video. Pieces of it flickered, her face, its face, something shifting, breaking apart. It let out a sound that wasn't human. And then, it was gone. Emily lay there, staring at the ceiling, her breath ragged. Her mother was kneeling beside her, hands on her face, sobbing, whispering her name over and over like a prayer. And in the shattered remains of the hallway mirror, Emily finally saw herself. Just herself. For the first time in years. But in the reflection, scrawled in jagged letters across the broken glass, were the last words of the thing that had tried to take her place. "You stole my life. One day, I'll take it back." Emily closed her eyes. Because somehow, deep down, she knew it was telling the truth.